So hi, today I will be teaching you a new topic in Python. So this is actually a very fundamental um, concept in Python. It's about variables. What are variables? So what we are actually seeing on screen is actually a brief note that I have come up with to kind of like make this tutorial much more organized, and I will be sharing this PDF with you so that even after watching the video you can actually go through the written content and you can learn the concept quite well. So back to the topic, what are variables? Actually, as I have shown you here, the variables are names that are used to label data. Okay, so the data that we are working with in Python, these data we can use labels to point to these data. Okay, so these data actually are stored in memory locations. Okay, so once these data are stored in memory locations, we can use certain user defined names to label these data. Okay, so what are these data that we are talking about, or what are these data for which we are making these variables or labels? Okay, so these data, they can be numerical data, like they can be integers, they can be float values, floating point numbers, um, or they could be string object or byte object, or they could also be complex data structures. Okay, any of them could be data. Okay, let's see, for example, sorry, for example, let's see. So here, a numerical data could be uh, an integer like 5. Okay, so okay, so you can see here actually we will learn about all these class and integer, class integer, and everything we will learn later on. As of now, I just wanted to show you this actually is a numerical data in Python. Okay, so uh, 5 here is a numerical data of type integer. Okay, so that is one data that we kind of work with in Python, and another data here. So let's say, yeah, it's actually another data. It's again one numerical data. We call it floating point number. Okay, or a float value. So this is also one numerical data that we work with in Python. Okay, and one more data I will introduce. It's I just want to type my name here. Okay, so it's actually str. You can see here. This is called a string object. Okay, that is another data that we work with in Python. Okay, so sometimes I can actually provide a b here. So and it will show that it's a byte object. Okay, this is another data, um, byte information. Okay, and so all these data that we use in Python, so these data we actually store in memory locations, and when we store in memory locations, we also use labels to kind of like point to uh, point to those data. And another thing, the next thing that we want to look at is actually why are variables important? Okay, so I have written it down. I just wanted to read it out. So there is an analogy that we can go by, so which will tell you why we need variables. For example, let's say in your house, uh, probably in your kitchen, you have cupboard. Okay, so inside the cupboard, probably you have jars or bottles, and in a cupboard, let's imagine there are some countable number of um, bottles or jars. So inside each bottle or jar, you can store object. Okay, so that's how you store object. Okay, very safely inside the kitchen. So now uh, let's liken the cupboard to a memory. Okay, a physical memory, and each jar or each bottle we can liken to memory location. Okay, so when you imagine the cupboard as a memory, and when you imagine all the bottles that are kept inside the cupboard, when you imagine these, or when you liken these bottles inside the cupboard as memory locations, we can say that each object that you put inside the bottle is a data. Okay, so this is a very organized way of keeping things. So whenever, and what you do later on actually is you put a label onto the bottle. Okay, so later on, whenever you want to take an object, a particular object, you can just make use of that label, because that label that you have stuck onto the bottle is basically telling you what object it is there inside. Okay, so if you want to take an object, you can basically make use of the label. So going by this analogy, we can say that uh, whenever you place a data, okay, whenever you place this data in a memory location in your memory, you also use a variable as a label which is pointing to that particular data in the memory location. So whenever you want to work with that particular data, or whenever you want to access that data, you can just pull it out using the variable that you have defined to label that data. So if you want to access a particular data stored in a memory location, you can use the variable. Okay, you can use this label to pull it out. Okay, so that is what basically you use the variables for. Okay, so now we will look at how do we create variable. Okay, so we have looked at what a variable is, and now we want to look at how we can create a variable in Python. Okay, so before moving to the Python interpreter, we just want to see. Okay, so as you can see here on this PDF, a variable is created as follows. Okay, so here actually you can see that there are two variables I have defined here. So here actually the variable 1 and variable 2, they are the variables, and we have assigned two different values to these variables. So here a string data widget, you can see it on the screen. The first one actually is a string data. Okay, string data, numerical data, we will go through all of them later on in the upcoming classes, but as of now I just want you all to see how a particular variable is created here, how a data can be stored in a memory location with a variable labeled to that. So here widget is a string data, and that data is assigned to a particular variable. Okay, which means here what is going to happen is that the widget that the string object here, the string data here, will be stored in a memory location. Okay, and we will use variable 1 as a label to point to that data in that particular memory location. And secondly, you can see here a numerical value 5 is stored in the memory location, and we are using a variable here, variable 2, to label uh, that memory location. Okay, so here let's see how actually we do it here. So we'll go to the screen, and okay, so we have just seen now variable, user variable. Let's see, user variable. This is actually a variable that I want to use here, and here actually I want to assign a string data to that particular variable. Now actually if I want to pull out that variable, all I can do is I can simply provide the variable name here, and it will simply print out, okay, it will simply print out the value. Okay, or if I provide a numerical value here, it will simply pull it out. Okay, as you can see here. So what is happening here is that here I have placed a numerical value in a memory location, and the user variable actually is labeling the memory location which has now stored the value 5. Okay, I'm telling it again. So here what I have done is I have placed a numerical value in a memory location, and I have used a label or a variable to label the memory location which has stored that particular numerical value. Okay, now let's go back. So I have been talking about the memory location. So what exactly is this memory location? So basically, these all memory locations in the physical memory, they have individual addresses. Okay, so when you place a numerical value or any data in a memory location, that memory location has a memory address. Okay, so using the ID function, we can actually know what the memory address is. Okay, what the address of a particular memory location is. So when you store a data in a memory location, and you define a variable to label that memory location, or then you can actually get to know the address of that memory location just by using that ID function. Okay, so let's see how we can do that. So for example, I have created a variable here. So if I want to print out the memory location where I have saved this numerical data, all I have to do is I just can provide the label or the variable that is associated with the value I saved in that particular memory location. If I print it out, it shows this a huge numerical value running into several number of digits. So this is actually the memory location, the memory address associated with the memory location where I have saved the numerical value 5 and the user variable, that particular label is pointing towards that memory location. Okay, so I think you have understood now. Now we will now go to another important concept. Okay, so more than one variable can label the same data in a memory address. Okay, so in this interpreter, actually I have shown you that user variable, actually that is the variable or the label pointing towards the memory location where the numerical value 5 has been stored. Okay, you can actually define one more variable that can also point towards the same memory location where 5 has been stored here. So for example, I am using user variable 2. Okay, so I can simply assign, okay, the same value, okay, here user variable and user variable 2. These two variables actually are pointing towards the same memory location where 5 has been stored here. Let's see if they are pointing towards the same memory location or not. How can we find it out? We can use the id function here. So let's say print id function. Within the id function, I just want to provide the variable. Okay, so if I do that, and on below that, I just want to print the memory address of user variable 2 also. This is the this is the second variable that I have defined to label the same memory location where I have stored 5 here. Let's see if both are showing the same memory address or not. Okay, so you can see here both the values are actually the same, which means both the variables are pointing towards the same memory location where the numerical value 5 has been stored. Okay. So yeah, I hope you have understood that. It's actually very basic concept. And another thing, so we have here the two variables we have defined, and both the variables are actually labeling the same memory location where a numerical value 5 has been stored. Now, when two variables label the same memory address, changing one of them does not automatically change the other. Okay, so when two variables label the same data in a memory address or memory location, and when you assign a different value to one of those variables, the other variable remains unchanged, which means it labels the same old data. Okay, so don't get confused. What I am trying to say is, let's say I have two variables I have defined here. Okay, so print, I just want to print before changing the variables, before changing the variables, I just want to print out the memory address to which the user variable 1 is pointing, and id and user variable 2 pointing. Okay, next what I am going to do is actually I just can print an empty print statement here so that we can kind of distinguish both of them. Now what I am going to do now is I just want to assign a new value to one of the two variables. So let's say user variable 2, I'm assigning a different value now, 10. What I'm expecting is that, okay, so here I can also add user variable is equal to user variable 1. Okay, for user variable 2. So now what I have done is actually here now the user variable, which in the very starting, this user variable is pointing to a memory location where I have stored 5. Now actually the user variable, I have made it to label the memory location where the numerical value 10 is stored. So I just want to see, when I do this, does the user variable 2 also automatically label the memory location where the numerical value 10 is stored, or no matter what I did to the user variable, the first user variable, the second user variable should remain unchanged. It shouldn't change its label. Okay, it should invariably, as long as I change its value. Okay, as long as I change its value, the second variable should label the old memory location where 5 is stored. So let's see if it is going to happen or not. Okay, what I am going to do is, after that, I just want to print out uh, the identity of the memory location where user variable is being a label. Okay, so I also want to print out the ID of the memory location where user variable 2 is being a label. I just want to see if they are changing or not. Okay, let's print it out. Okay, so you can see here that when we had the user variable and user variable 2, when these two user variables were labeling the memory location where the numerical value 5 has been stored, the memory address, when we printed it out, you can see here, this is the memory address of the memory location where the numerical value 5 has been stored, and these two variables are pointing towards that memory location here. Now, later on, what did I do? I changed the numerical value. Okay, I changed the sense I assigned a new value to the second user variable, in the sense that now the user variable, the first one actually, I'm sorry, the first one, this one actually, the user variable, not the user variable 2. So the user variable actually has now been assigned with a different value now. Okay, so now if I check the memory address of the memory location which the user variable is labeling now, what I can see here is that now the address has been changed. Before that it was ending with 248, now it's actually 408. Okay, so now the user variable is labeling a different memory location with a different memory address in which a different numerical value is being stored, whereas the one whose value remains unchanged is still pointing towards the memory location where the numerical value 5 is stored. So you can see here it still shows the old memory address, which means it is still labeling the old memory location where the numerical value 5 is stored. Okay, so I hope you have understood it now. Now let's go back and check. We can go to the next section here now. Okay, the same variable cannot label more than one data stored in different memory addresses. So it's simple actually. What I am trying to say here is that let's get rid of all these extra data we don't need now. So here what you can see here, I have created a user variable here, and I have assigned with that a numerical value. Okay, now if I assign a different value to the same data, okay, here actually I just want to print out the memory address of the location where 5 is stored. So I'm using the ID function and user variable. Okay, so now what I have done was, I have assigned a new numerical value to the user variable here. Okay, I just want to write down assigned a new numerical value to the variable. Okay, now I just want to see if the user variable can label both the memory locations, one storing the numerical value 5, the other storing the numerical value 10. Is it going to happen or not? I just want to look at. Or the user variable is now labeling only the memory location where the numerical value 10 is being stored. Okay, so here I just want to print out the ID function here and I just want to provide the user variable here. Okay, now I'm going to print it out on the screen. What I'm seeing is that when I assigned a new value to the old user variable, now this is actually labeling the new memory location where the numerical value 10 is being stored, not the one in which the numerical value 5 is being stored. No, it's not the case. Okay, so that's it. So now let's see what we can do. Okay, now that's all, and we can now go to some another important topic here. So how to name a variable? Okay, so when you declare a variable, it should contain only alphabets, numbers, and underscore. Okay, so you can use alphabets A to Z, or it could be it could be all the small case alphabets, or it could be the uppercase alphabets, and numerical values from 0 to 9 you can use. Also you can use underscore. You cannot use any other special characters. And one important thing is that you cannot use a numerical value of the starting letter of your variable name. For example, another thing, you can have a variable name containing exclusively of, or it's a user variable created exclusively out of small case alphabets, or exclusively out of uppercase alphabets, but you can also mix them up. You can have small case alphabets, and you can have uppercase alphabets. You can have a mix of small case alphabets, uppercase alphabets, and numericals. But you cannot start a variable name with a number. Okay, the number can come anywhere other than the starting position. And you can also use underscore. The underscore can come anywhere. Okay, so we will see actually some of the fancy variables that you can provide when you write your code here. So let's say, let's get rid of all the print function here. Let's focus on here. So you can have user variable. This is actually a valid, okay, I'm printing it out here. No. User variable here. If I print it out, and what we can see here is that actually this is actually valid, it's actually a valid user variable here. Okay, so you can also use all uppercase alphabets here, user variable here. So I'm copying it all here and just pasting it all here. I just want to see if yeah, sure, I think the tick mark is there, which means it should print it out. And you can have a user variable which is a mix of small letter and capital letter. Wait, okay, just I'm copying it here, and I just want to see if it is a valid variable or not. Yeah, it's a valid variable here. Okay, this is still showing that the value associated with it. Now I just want to mix up the alphabets and the numericals. So for example, I just want to print out 5 here. Okay, I just want to print out 5 here. Yeah, it's actually is a valid user variable. Now what I am going to do now, so I said I can also have underscore here, so I'm going to add one underscore here and another underscore here. Okay, and also I'm going to add another underscore in the middle, so it will kind of like help you get rid of all the confusion associated with what are all the places where we can use the underscore when you define a new variable here. So let's see, it's actually a valid variable because it didn't pop up any error. So now what I am going to do is, now you have understood underscore can be used anywhere within the variable name. Now I just want to use a numerical value in the very starting. So now see, okay, everything has turned red, which means, yeah, it's invalid. Okay, invalid decimal literal. Okay, so you cannot have a number in the very beginning of a variable name. Okay, that's it. So these are all the conventions. And another thing that you have to keep in mind is that, when you define a user variable here, so let's say user variable, or I just want to type user variable, and the second user variable I want to name it like user variable is equal to 10. Okay, actually the uppercase, when you use uppercase to name your variable versus when you use a small case to name your variable, both the variables are different. Okay, so Python can distinguish a variable created exclusively out of small case alphabets from user variables created exclusively out of uppercase. Or if you kind of like mix them up in random ways, even if you read them, actually they both linguistically both are the same thing. User variable, linguistically both are the same, but actually Python kind of like can distinguish one from the other. So programmatically both are two different variables, and you can actually print it out. If you print out the ID user variable here, versus if you print out the versus if you print out here ID of user variable here, both should show two different memory addresses. So both are two different variables labeling two different memory locations where two different numerical values are being stored. Yeah. So now next thing actually what we want to kind of like have a look at is so here naming conventions used in Python. So actually what I have told, you can name a variable using alphabets, numericals, and underscore. So your variable can be a complex word, which means multiple small words can be joined together to create your complex variable name. For example, user variable, you can see that actually it's a complex word, user and variable. Okay, so when you have such complex variable names, there are certain conventions that programmers follow, so that it actually provides for a proper understandability. Okay, so also maintainability. So when you have certain complex variable names, programmers follow certain rules, so that when we stick to such a same set of rules, it's easier for maintainability of the code and understandability of the code. Also, it's easy for the programmers to troubleshoot in case if they get stuck on any bug or any error. So in Python actually, when you create variables, when you use complex words to create variables, there are two main conventions that programmers follow. One is called camel case convention, and the second one is called snake case convention. So I will kind of make it enlarged, as you can see here. One is called the camel case convention here. You can read it here, camel case convention. And the second one is called snake case convention. So these are the two conventions or two sets of rules that programmers follow when they have to use a complex name for their variable. So let's see what a camel case convention is. So I will read it out actually, and then we will go and check it out. In the camel case convention, the first word of your variable name starts with a small case alphabet, and the subsequent words start with capital case alphabets. Okay, an example has been provided here. So here, what I have told, when you use a camel case convention in your user variable, when the user variable actually is a complex name, the first word should start with a small case, and the subsequent words actually can start with or should start with capital letters. So user actually is the first word, and it should start with the small case, and the second word actually is a variable, and it should start with a capital V, and then we have defined, which should also start with the capital D here. Okay, so that is the camel case convention. And in the snake case convention, actually, I will read it out what it is. In the snake case convention, the individual words in the variable name are separated by underscores. So here, the individual words are user, variable, and defined. So there should be an underscore separating the user and the variable parts of the variable name. And there should be one more underscore that should separate the words variable and defined in your variable name. Okay. So these are the two conventions that programmers actually follow when declaring the user variables, and when the user variable the user variable actually has or is a complex word. So that's it. That's all about the variable, and so this actually is a very fundamental concept, and even though I spoke about the convention, you can define variable in the way you want. These are just the conventions that programmers follow. That doesn't mean that if you kind of like add a numerical value in your complex variable name, it should also work actually. It is not the case that if you kind of like steer away from this convention, your program won't work. No, that is not the case. It should work, but actually it is always better to kind of like follow a set of rules, so that when you have to read somebody else's code, you actually understand what exactly it is. Because in Python, you have to you have keywords, or you have different classes, you have different functions, you have variables, you have methods. Okay, all such different aspects are there when it comes to programming. So if you kind of like follow a set of rules when you define classes, functions, and methods, if you follow a certain convention, actually it is easier for you to figure out what it is. Okay, and it also helps you when you troubleshoot your code. And lastly, one important thing that I haven't included in this PDF, but actually I think is very important. It is nothing but there are certain words that you cannot use to to define your variable. For example, if I use the print, and if I print here ID, oh yeah, so it shows an error. Why? What is the problem here? Actually, this variable actually contains alphabets all in small case. It shouldn't be a problem at all. So what is the problem? There is no numerical value in the very beginning of the variable name. So why did it pop up an error? Okay, so here it's not callable actually. the thing is, for example, if I try to kind of like call print, if I do this, actually, it's not possible. Why? Because print actually is a reserved word. Actually, it is reserved actually for some other purpose. You cannot use that name for a variable. The print has a different function in Python. You cannot use that as a variable. So there are certain keywords in Python that have certain function in Python. You cannot use them to use as a variable. Another thing, print, apart from print, if you use while, okay, if I print out, when I type it down while, you can see the color has changed. So if I use it, it shows invalid syntax. So you cannot use certain words as variable actually, because they perform certain different other function in Python. Okay, so these keywords actually we will come to know in subsequent classes. We will come to know. So until then, okay, I hope you have understood the today's tutorial. I will be sharing the printout in the description below the video, so you can actually download it and go through the video and go through the PDF. You can actually, you can have both the resources, the video and the written content together when you learn about variables. So if you have any comment, if you have any suggestions, criticism, whatever, constructive criticism, everything, whatever it is, you can let me know in the comment box, and I will accommodate them, I will include them, and improve my video quality, content quality. Okay, and until we meet with a next tutorial, I am signing off, and thank you for watching the video. Thank you so much.